All right, back at it. We are doing some fall leaves today from Kraftin Kimmie. This is part of the August release. And originally, my plan was to use one of the new stencils from this month, and I used the ink that was also released this month and did this kind of background paper pattern, and then I was going to do 3 of the leaves and kind of bundle them up on here, but I've had a request to show kind of the swirl that I put on one of my cards earlier in the week. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then we'll kind of see how that comes out in card form. So today I am coloring up these 3 leaves, and then I'll show you kind of how I did the swish on the background on the other card. And as always, I am using a photo reference. So this is one that I just found that had some really kind of bold, bright fall colors. That's what I was going for. And then I've done some testing and found color combinations that got me to where I wanted on those. Couple options on all of these. You can try to leave like the stem and all the veins a lighter color if you want, or you can just go darker. Completely your option. And if you've stamped this in black, obviously those are already going to be like, all these little veins are going to be that black, where on some of these other ones they're open. So choices to make as the artistic kind of person at that end when you're coloring these in. I have stamped these in precious pink, and so I'm going to do some no line coloring, kind of my thing these days, or a lot of the time. So I'm going to start with this one, and it's going to be this kind of reddish, deeper orange red color kind of at the core, and then it's coming out to that goldeny yellow. I'm not totally sure. I feel like this is a lot of vein work, and one of the leaves I'm kind of going to combine two, so that I'm going to actually go darker with the vein work on this one. So you can play around with that. I am going to go, let's see, I think on this one I'm going to have better luck. Maybe, actually, no, I'm going to go light to dark. So I'm going to leave that center vein light for now, but I'm going to go ahead and go over all of the other vein work, and I am going to cut these out. So I'm not super concerned about the outer edge with all of those little ins and outs. But I'll go through and hit them. Now, obviously this will have a lot of detail if you're not planning on cutting these out. So on my first card that I did not cut that one out. I stamped it on the page, and then I did the blue kind of wind swirl. Get you guys closer, see if I can manage to not fall off. I did that all as one layer. So the leaf is stamped on the piece of paper. The swirl is done then around the leaf. It's kind of a pain in the you know what, but that is what I did on that one. I hope you are starting to have kids head back to school and that it's going well. My girls are headed that way. All right. So then I've got, sorry, that was Y21. I'm not being very helpful. That was Y21 Buttercup Yellow. And then I am heading over to YR24, and this one is called Pale Sepia. All right, so I'm not going to worry really about the vein work on this leaf, because I'm going to come back as it dries and get those darker. So I'm just going to go kind of from the heart of the leaf, from that central vein out, and I am going to go along the veins, kind of accentuate those a little bit more. I am a person who will not blend a leaf completely smooth. You'll see that here as I get these layers added on. I purposefully will leave some of that texture showing. I like the look of that. I feel like it looks a little more like a real leaf. So for me, that is a look that I enjoy and like, but it's certainly a personal choice. You could absolutely, this is a color combo that I'm using today that will blend more smoothly if you want it to. We have had a kind of cooler end of our summer season here. So that was the YR24, and then I'm going to shift to a YR18. Now this is going to be a much more, it's called, ooh, I can't even see this one. Nope. Not even sure what that says. Sorry. Sanguine, SANGUINE, maybe. Okay, so this is going to come from that center again, but in much smaller amounts. So I'm definitely going to come closer into the core of the leaf. And it may go all the way up to the top. It may not. Let's see. It's getting shorter, shorter. I might stop right in here, kind of leave it a couple little dots. Then we'll come over to the other side. And leaves are definitely one that I end up wanting to flip around quite a bit. The reason being that I want to come out from that center. And so in order to do that, I just keep flipping it so that I can flick outward from there. My hand works better in one direction, like most do. Okay. So even though I haven't specifically left the vein work lighter, hopefully you can actually see what's happening there because of the way I've done the color kind of in between those vein lines. I don't, except for like right here. In fact, let's work on that just a touch. I'm not seeing the veins, those pink lines. What I'm seeing is kind of the in-between the color. So I don't necessarily want to see this much flicking, so I am going to go back. And I could do this with my lightest color as well, but I'm going to try kind of real lightly to kind of one pass. So I'm starting right back in at the core and flicking out with my mid-tone again. Soften that edge. It warms the whole thing up again anyway. Remember, every time you lay that marker down on the paper, it's going to change that tone. It's going to get a little darker, a little deeper, because you're adding another layer of ink. So even if I didn't change colors from one to the next, you're going to get a color. If you do all Y21, you would still continue to get darker as you add layers. So all I'm going to do now is come from that outer edge of the leaf and flick inward once. It may go all the way to the center, it may not, but it's going to just soften those edges. Soften this guy a little bit more because it has that funny little side piece there. Okay, now I could go in right now and add this darker vein down the center and the little hints coming out, but I'm debating now if that's what I want to do. But even if I was going to do that, I'd actually want to let this dry, because if I come in with my brown and do that now, it's going to just spread out on that. One detail I am going to add, a lot of times on leaves, you'll see these little edges kind of get crisped up and brown. This is an E15, which is dark suntan. That might be one on your marker that the name has turned into something different. So just be aware of that. There's a couple that have changed over time. So if yours is not called that, it might be a newer marker. Or yeah, that would be right. It'd be a newer marker that has been changed. So I'm just adding this little smattering of that dark out on some of the edges. And then this will be my debate, is if I want to do a darker core. It worked out so well that I can actually see that vein work without even really trying, that I'm thinking I might leave it light now. So let's do this. Y21. Let's go ahead and color right down that center. I have an idea. So let's color that. And then we're going to give some little accents in here with that brown in just a minute. But this has got so much moisture, I can feel it. So I'm going to let that sit for a second. Let's shift. We have another one that's going to start with some of those yellows and go a little bit more into a brown. Not really brown, but it's not going to get as bright as that YR18 on this one. So we're going to start with the Y21 again. Buttercup yellow. And I'll go ahead and fill this in. Now this one has open vein work, so each of these have a little bit of a space there that if I want to, I could leave them lighter or darker, and especially if you've stamped in the black, that becomes your choice very easily. No real thinking involved. You don't have to think, am I leaving the upper side or the lower lighter? Just adjust as needed. Okay. Then, and see, I wrote this down because I have so much sitting on my table, so this is going to just help me. So then I'm looking for my Y26. So if you have a Y28, this is one step down from that. It's called mustard. The Y28 is that lionette gold, and it has that real distinct kind of olivey tone to it. So this one, on this particular leaf, it's actually it's not as distinct where the dark is coming from. It's more coming from the edges. And again, I'm just working from this photograph, and then it's coming in. But it's not so much a flick as it's kind of this mottled look. I'll pull it over. I got this off of Shutterfly, by the way. That's the watermark on there. But it's very mottled. It's not that smooth transition from one color into the next. So that is what I'm aiming for. And so I'm kind of just dabbing the color in. I don't have a better word for that. It's not really dots, although some of them end up looking like kind of dots. And I'm coming down each of these little canals in between the vein and leaving that yellow kind of around the veins. So it's going to just work my way all the way around. And you're going to have a darker color that comes in here too. So, but this, hopefully you can see this. The Y26 has this, it's starting toward that lionette gold, and then it does have that green feel to it as well. So if it's looking a little green on your screen, you don't need to adjust anything. That is actually what this color looks like, which for me was kind of the perfect, what I was aiming for. So then what if you don't have this particular color? Where would you go from there? So the first one I would say is, do you have an E8? One of the E8s. So like an E81 or an E84. That's going to have this earthy, mossy feel to it, and that might work. Or you could really layer up, if it would go more green if you used one of the YGs. I'm trying to think what else would be a really good. And you don't have to go with that olive undertone. The next color I am using, I think I said what that one was. Yeah, mustard, is actually a YR27, and this is Tuscan Orange. Good name on this one. So again, we're going to come from these outer corners, and this one doesn't come near as far down, but it's kind of, I am going to pull it a little bit further, but it's sporadic. It's still kind of blotchy. What's fun about a leaf like this and coloring like this is, like, I'm using that photo for reference, but it's so loose, and there's not, ooh, you put that in the wrong place. How could I have? It's kind of just all over. So I actually really like things that have this loose feel to them. I've got a couple places on my photo that get quite a bit darker, and then some that stay lighter. So again, I'm trying to make it irregular. Easier said than done on occasion, right? Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, is make something less in and out, in and out, in and out. It's harder to get things to look haphazard and created by nature. Okay. I think we're kind of getting there. Now this one's stem is kind of unusual in that the very tip of the stem is darker, so I'm going to start with that. But then we're actually going to see some greens. And so the other thing is I've got, and I'm just referring back, I actually have some of this darker color and some of the vein work as well. So now this is kind of looking like a mess at the moment. All I can see is that blotchiness. And I'm going to go back and forth a little bit, but the first thing I'm going to do is take this Y21 and I'm going to soften the entire thing. So I'm going to circle over it one time. I'm not scrubbing it. I'm just kind of giving it a wash. And then I'm going to let it sit for a second and let it move. So some things I'm seeing already. Right here, this looks like an outline, outline, outline. Not enough going on in here. So that really does need to change a little bit. So I'm going to come in and pull that out. This is that in between Y26. And soften some of these little other areas while I'm at it. All right. But I feel like it's kind of this outline, and I'm trying to avoid that if I can. So then let's kind of go in and unbalance this a little. Already better. What's amazing to me is it usually takes very little. So I was seeing here, here, here. So I go back in and I overweight or add weight to another spot, and it immediately takes your eye away from that. And so it really is a little bit of playing with this. And I like how it's softened, but I needed more color back in there. So feeling much better about this. And I know I'm going to get closer in to those veins because I feel like that didn't get filled in near enough either, but I'm getting close. Okay. So I think I've got a couple things left to do. This leaf right down the center and then kind of coming out from that a little, it's actually green. So I've pulled over a YG63, which is pea green, and I'm going to come right up, right through the center of that vein work. Now here's the beauty of stamping in that precious pink, that really light pink. If I'm not perfectly within that, it kind of disappears. Haha. You can barely see those little veins anymore as it is. And so as I come in, if I'm not hitting them right on, it usually is okay. Now, if you got really close and examined, would you see it? You probably would. But most of the people I send cards to don't look that tightly, that closely. So I've got the hint of those greens. I'm going to come out and add that onto that part of the stem. And then I don't know if you remember me saying this, but what I was seeing is actually out on these tips, it changes into this kind of darker color. So I'm going to start in at the core and come out, and I'm definitely going to have to turn this. So let's start with this. And if I need to hit the green again, I will. All right. Pretty content, and I could go in and add more of those if I want. Very light touch. If you're a person who struggles with that, getting those really fine little lines, one thing to try, first of all, you could use a sepia like multi-liner or a brown pen, sketch pen, or you can open up your chisel nib, the medium broad. You have these nice sharp little corners. A lot of us don't use this in very often. And if you go right onto one of those little tiny corners, and then your pressure control doesn't matter quite so much, you might have a better luck with that. So I'm going to hold there because I'm pretty content with how that's looking. If I want to soften the veins, I could do a wash with that Y21 again. But I'm actually pretty pleased with that. So I think I'm going to stop. And then I've got this one last little grouping, and I really wanted to do something a little more dramatic with this one. And so I've got this really intense group of E's that we're going to go for. So it's going to be the E04, which is lipstick natural, and that's going to go right down the center, kind of the core of the leaf. And I'm not going out to the edges yet. I'm going to lose those edges here pretty quickly. And even with this first little piece, I'm losing the vein work. So a couple suggestions. You could kind of do one leaf at a time. You could do your dark first so that you don't lose that vein, because the veins are going to be darker on this one, and then kind of work out from there. Or if you're not super concerned about it being exact, you can kind of keep your stamp nearby so you kind of have a sense of, oh yeah, don't forget all those little veins. So that part I'm leaving up to you. I'm entrusting you with that decision. So that was E04. This is E07, which is light mahogany. Have some beautiful names coming your way today. So then this is unusual about this one too. I'll pull this back over. This is not this kind of leaf, but this is what I'm using as a reference. This is the one I'm using for my reference. So notice again how the dark is happening more on the outer edges. And you could go either way on the vein work, light or dark. I'm probably going to do dark just to keep it a little bit simpler. But I am going to work my way from the outer edge and kind of flick inward. And I may not even go all the way around the leaf. So I'm going to have to come back anyway, but I might leave kind of one little section, that E04, on a few of them. And I'm just going to work all the way around. Kind of really define that one since it's overlapping this other one. I'm going to leave a little tiny gap there, and I'll get close here in just a second so you guys can see that. So I left a gap kind of right in there between the two leaves so I can see it and find it again. It's not how I'm going to leave it at the end, but it's going to help me find the separation between those two leaves. And there is a train of thought out there of leaving those light spots kind of at the edges of things these days. You'll see a lot of Copic artists and just artists in general starting to do that, kind of at the edges. And again, artistic choice. I do that on occasion, but more rarely. You can argue that it is reflected light. And so there are some cases where that would happen. I just don't use it very often in such small images. And I'm not, even though I'm using photo references for my color choices, I'm not necessarily going for photorealism. There's a difference there. I need probably a bigger image to do that. And I'm happy doing my little cards, keeping it a little bit simpler. But that is that. 2 cents for you there. Okay. There we go. So before I move to my darkest, I'm actually going to go back to my lighter because I left some of those little edges open. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that gap in. The E04 is a really unique color if you have not used it before or if you do not have it. So I don't always do this, but this is a color again that I would recommend that you get for your Copic bag. It's one I actually use a lot. It has this blue undertone to it that ends up coming out of my bag, but it is literally my favorite. Yes, I'm going to say my favorite for doing lips on faces. It is, out of all the colors in my bag, it comes out more often for that than anything else. So if you're a person who does little faces that have lips, and sometimes obviously those little stamps don't have lips on them, they're too tiny. But if you do faces that have lips, this is truly the one that I pull out. Okay, so not fully blended yet, but I have one more color. Actually, I have two, but E09, which is burnt sienna. Again, another color. That E04 and E09 are one of my favorite pairs. So just throwing that out there. And I'm not usually using them on leaves. That is what you're getting today. So then I'm going to start by hitting the vein, and it's not going to be exactly what's on the stamp. It just isn't. And then on that darker edge, I'm going to go back in and hit it right along that edge. So I'm coming from the center stem, which I did in the E09. Then I'm coming out on the leaf, hitting that darker edge and making it one step even darker. So this is where I can kind of separate these two if I want. And I don't want it to be an outline, not the goal. So when I come back, I will attempt to get those kind of blended in together a little bit more. I definitely have to turn here. Because I don't want it to be an actual outline. That's not the goal, which it's looking like in a couple places right now. So here we go. I hope I am mostly staying on the screen today. I've adjusted my iPad when I'm filming so it's a little bit higher. Sorry. Sometimes it's easier to color without visiting. All right, we're closing in. Here's my next one that has kind of that overlap. And this one has the dark on the bottom edge, but not across the top. It's the other leaf that's going to show. We'll get that a little bit darker so that we see the separation. One last one. Okay, here we go. So then the challenge is, can we make it look less like an outline and more like the shading on the leaf? The answer is extremely easily, because these three colors melt together, literally melt. I am barely touching those E09 areas with this E07, and it just is kind of melting into it. So we get this beautiful blend with a very light touch. It just takes so little. And then I'll touch it one more time in a couple spots with the E04. And I'm going to show you an optional step. Okay. And you know me, I'm always going to take the optional step if I'm going to show it to you, just to add another little something, right? Okay. So I'm actually really liking the way this is looking. It's very subtle. That was really my intent with this one. I don't know if you noticed over here, I've got a fourth color, and that is V09. This is up to you if you want to try to add this in. It goes into the darkest spots. And so I am literally going to come in kind of right where those little stems start, and kind of come up maybe one corner or just the stem, and add this V09. Again, the goal is not to outline, it's to enhance and extend kind of that shading and that color. So obviously on a couple of these, I'll come out to the tip where it got dark out on the tips. V09 is a color that also lends itself to blending in with other colors. It's one that you can use for cast shadows or to deepen that shadow color on really a ton of stuff. So it should be one that it might frequent your pages as well. Let's see, one more. Okay. So I think the only thing I want to do, I'm liking the way it looks right at the inner corner. The only one I'm going to touch is this one, because this one ended up, I think I put it in the wrong spot. So that needs a little work. But I'm going to come out to these tips, and I'm going to kind of soften that in. I think I picked the wrong color to do that with. Let's try it. I think I'd be happier with this. There we go. So this is that V07. Better. So this little leaf is going to get a little work here, because I did not put that where I should. There we go. So E07. So the only one I'm not real pleased with is this one who's supposed to be kind of sitting behind the other one, but now it's ended up kind of popping out. So I'm going back with my E04. And so then the question is, do I want to make it sitting? I'm going to go back. Okay. So this leaf, at least on the stamp, is sitting on top. So I think what I'm going to need to do in order to keep it on top is I'm going to go back with that V09, and this one's going to get kind of that corner treatment. And then E07. There we go. All right. 3 leaves. And I will be fussy cutting those, and unfortunately this one's going to be a bear, but it'll happen. Okay, and then there were questions about the swirl on the card. So that happened with 3 colors. It is a B000, which is pale porcelain blue, I think. I have a B60, which is pale blue gray, and a B41, which is powder blue. So literally, and of course the other one I had the image right in the middle, so I was having to work my way around it. So I was coming up to the leaf and stopping, and then coming around. And what I literally did is from the leaf and back, and I just picked up a little orange somehow. I came back and forth. I'm using kind of the broad edge of my brush. Of course, we don't have that leaf, so we can kind of continue on. So on an image like this, I would encourage you to go bigger. So like this is the size of a card front. If you knew that you wanted it to go all the way across the card front, I'd actually do your swirl on a bigger piece of paper, because every time I hit this edge, it makes kind of a mess. So I would encourage you, it pulls at that marker. So I would encourage you to go bigger. Makes it much easier. So that was the B000. This is a B41. And again, I'm using that way over on the side. So look where I'm holding my marker. I'm not up here. I'm way back here, so that it can sit all the way over on its side. And I end up with little hiccups and little bumps, because obviously I'm having trouble holding on to my paper today. And it kind of swirled around and in on itself. That's kind of what happened with my other one. You can make it as tight or as open as you want it to be. And then I had one more color, which is the B60. It has kind of a violet or a purpley tone to it, but basically I wanted to find 3 blue tones that I could overlay with each other. But here's the point. Notice that my marker is moving fairly quickly, and I'm trying to go kind of the length. So if I'm doing that swirl, I'm trying to come all the way around, all the way around. The more I stop and start along there, then you see those stopping starting points. So I'm going to encourage you, if you try a technique like this, if nothing else, make sure you're lifting up if you're not going to make it all the way across. I'm going to broaden this little edge. And the beauty of it is I can keep adding kind of as much as I want. And if it gets too dark, I could go in with a colorless blender and real slowly add some highlights back in there. But kind of play with it. Anyway, that is the swirl. So I'll either be using this and or this, which actually they look really, really cool together. So if I can figure out a way to get it all on there. And then these guys cut out on top. That's going to be the card. Thank you as always for joining me. I hope that you had the time to let the video play out. I'm asking that of people right now just to help sponsor this channel and all that I'm doing for you guys on Facebook and YouTube. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks so much. If you have questions about Copic or this in particular, put those in the comments so I can get those answered for you. Otherwise, everybody have a happy, colorful week.